Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. I'm actually coming to you from my pantry. I have been working on this pantry for a couple of days, and I'll take you through and talk about this in a little bit. But first, I just want to share with you all the other things I've been working on over the past week or so that I had not shared. So one of the things that I have been working on is going through and printing recipes. If you have not visited my website, cosmopolitancornbread.com, I have over 800 recipes on that website. I was a blogger, a food writer, long before I ever picked up a video camera and started filming for YouTube. Blogging, food writing is really my first job. And it used to be that every time I published a recipe, I would go ahead and I would print it and I would put it in a binder. And so I had physical copies of every one of my recipes. Well, when my older son got married, he took my binders of all of my recipes. Now, I totally let him take them. I said, well, I'll just print out another copy and, you can just go ahead and take these. Well, I never got around to doing that, and that was quite some time ago. And I have a lot more recipes now than I did back then. And so I decided it was time to start getting a physical copy of all of my recipes. And so that is what I have been doing. And this stack right here, as you can see, it's quite thick, is not even a quarter of the recipes on my website. There's way more. I've just begun printing. I actually ran out of paper and had to go get more. And I went ahead and ordered some more ink while I was at it too, because there's so many recipes on there. But I decided it was important for me to have a physical copy. And while, yes, my website is essentially my family's digital cookbook, my own cookbook as well, I wanted a physical copy because you never know. Heaven forbid, something could happen and my website could be gone, and there would go 15 or more years of work. And so I decided it was time to do this. So that is one of the things I've been working on. We've also been working on freeze drying some more foods. I had mentioned that we had planned on freeze drying the smoked turkey and decided instead to go ahead and can that. And when we canned the meat, we went ahead and took the carcass, or I went ahead and took the carcass and made stock out of that. And in the video, I know I said broth a couple times. I use the terms interchangeably, even though technically they're not the same thing. Stock is made out of the bones and aromatics like onions and herbs and things like that, whereas broth is generally made from the meat. That's kind of like the short version of it, but I use the terms interchangeably, but stock is what I made. So I did go ahead and can that. I canned it just as though I was doing any other turkey stock or chicken stock. I have the recipe, the instructions for that on my website. I'll put a link to that down below if you are interested in finding that. And I'm pretty sure I have a video of doing turkey stock as well. But talking about the freeze drying, we have experimented with a couple of things. My sister-in-law was talking to my husband one day about the freeze dryer, and she said that she had gone to an event where there was vendors of some sort, and the freeze dryer table was the most popular one, and they had sold out of all of the goodies that she had wanted. She specifically wanted to try Skittles. So my husband was like, well, we'll freeze dry some Skittles for you and send them to you. So that was the first thing that we kind of experimented with, and it was quite interesting because the Skittles pop like popcorn and they get really, really hard and crunchy. I can't even think of what I would compare them to. But they were interesting. As a matter of fact, oh, here's what they look like. You can see them right there. And then the next thing that we experimented with was gummy bears, because they swell up super big. And I will say that was a complete and total freeze dryer flop because they did not turn out very well. Now, I didn't actually sample them because the gummy bears that we had were ones that Mr. Smith had picked up from the store, and they are made from gelatin that does not come from a biblically clean animal, and so I didn't eat any of those. And I love gummy things, but I wasn't too, yeah, I wasn't too sure about these. And from what we had read about them, it's really hit or miss when it comes to the gummy candies as to whether they turn out or not. I guess there's some specific brands that work out really well. But I don't think that that's something we would attempt to do again. We've mostly been working on freeze drying ingredients. I've been freeze drying things like onions and broccoli and leftovers. I did that huge batch of chili at Thanksgiving and I freeze dried the rest of it. You know, we are just trying to find ways to create food, shelf-stable foods, which is kind of the whole purpose of the freeze dryer. The candy thing was a fun detour, but that's definitely not something that we would do on a regular basis. We don't really consume a lot of sugar anyways. And, you know, it was just fun to kind of try that out. And like I mentioned, I've been freeze drying vegetables and things like that. And what I've been doing is buying the bulk frozen vegetables from Ezra Standard, and that has been going great. I just got some more veggies the other day that'll be going into the freeze dryer here shortly. But one of the things that I had gotten to freeze dry was a case of Marionberries, but when I pulled them out to put them in the freeze dryer, somewhere along the way they had gotten semi-melted, and it could have been when I brought them home that day because it was kind of warm the day I brought them home, and I had forgotten my cooler that day. And so I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to put these in the freeze dryer, and so I decided to just go ahead and make a batch of jam out of them. And as it turned out, that case had the exact amount of Marionberries that I needed for the Ball Blue Book berry jam recipe. It was 9 cups of berries, and so I added in the 6 cups of sugar, and then the instructions were to just let it cook down and cook and cook and cook until it thickened. Well, I cooked them, and I cooked them, and I cooked them, and I cooked them, and that jam just wouldn't thicken. So I don't know if it was something with the Marionberries. Maybe they don't have as much natural pectin in them. I don't know. But after it had been going and going and going, and I just decided, you know what, this is ridiculous. So I went ahead, I added a couple tablespoons of lemon juice to bring up the acid, and then I went ahead and I added in a pouch of liquid pectin because I wanted that jam to thicken up and I was tired of trying to cook it down. And when I did that, it worked perfectly. And then I went ahead and I canned them using the rest of the regular instructions. I think it was like 15 minutes for pints, but I did them in the 8-ounce jars instead. just because I like having smaller quantities for things like that. It still wasn't super thick, like a typical jelly, but it is a jam and it's fruity, it's thickened, it's spreadable, and that's what I was going for. Alright, so that brings me to the pantry. Now, back when we first moved here, if you saw the video where I was kind of setting up the pantry for the very first time, you may recall that there was actually a secret room in this pantry that we didn't know about when we bought this property. And I really wanted to be able to keep that secret room. However, we just needed the space. Now, we downsized when we came here. While technically the structure overall is bigger than our Alabama homestead, it's actually two homes in a way. It is the original cabin where Mr. Smith and I live, and then there is an attached apartment, a studio apartment, where my son, daughter-in-law, and grandbaby currently live. And this structure, the main cabin, it's only about 940 square feet, not including the loft that's up the spiral staircase in the living room. And there's not a lot up there. My desk is up there. That is my work area. And then there's kind of a little nook set up with a TV. Eventually, I'd like to find some sort of futon that I can put up there to have kind of like a little sitting area, but also a place where people can sleep when they come to visit. So the main floor, which is the kitchen, the living room, my room, Mr. Smith's room, you know, all of this, that's about 940 square foot, and then the loft is extra. And that is not a lot of space. And so when it comes to utilizing every bit of available space, that means every bit of available space. And I really couldn't sacrifice that square footage to have a secret hiding space here in the pantry. And so I had pulled out the shelving unit that hid this little nook that I'm actually kind of sitting in here, and had installed shelving. And originally I had put shelving on the main wall where you come in, shelving on the end wall by the window, and then a shelving unit in here. And I had talked about wanting to build shelving like I had built in Alabama, where it really utilized every square inch, how the shelves were perfectly spaced for jars so you didn't have a bunch of wasted space up above them. And somebody mentioned, one of my sweet subscribers actually mentioned, why don't you get another of the metal shelving units and take those shelves to add shelves to the existing one? That way you can squeeze those gaps down and fit more shelving in on what you've already got. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? And so I went to Lowe's and I bought another shelving unit that's identical to the ones that I had installed here. And I started working on respacing all of the shelves on this unit in particular. And I was able to take a 5-shelf unit and turned it into a 9-shelf unit. That is huge. And then after I had put it back together and I was bringing it back in here to the pantry, I realized, you know what? If I don't put it against this wall right here, and I turn it and I put it against this wall, there's still enough room to walk through, and then I could fit an entire additional shelving unit on this side. And it was the perfect size. I think I've got about a half an inch to an inch of space on either end, total combined. And so it was the perfect fit. And so by doing that, I was able to create kind of an L-shaped pantry and almost double the amount of space that I had in here between adding the shelves, adding a whole nother unit, and it worked out beautifully. After I got the shelving all in, then I worked on rearranging where everything sat. Now, there is a window here in the pantry, but because of the layout of our house, the way it is built, there is no direct light that comes through that window, even if there wasn't a curtain and a filter on the glass. There's just a gentle glow that comes through here, so I'm not really worried about the sunlight affecting my canned goods or anything like that. But just to be on the safe side, I did put all of these store-bought cans on the shelving unit that's in front of the window. That way there's nothing to worry about. Now, I had mentioned how in our homestead in Alabama, I had moved the microwave into the pantry because we don't use it very often. And I don't find the need to give it valuable real estate on my kitchen counter. I didn't in Alabama, and I definitely don't here in Arkansas because, again, we downsized significantly to move here. And so I have a shelf right here that has just this old microwave. This was actually in the apartment when we moved here, and we just went ahead and stuck this one here. We are going to replace this with a newer one because it's not a very strong microwave and it takes forever to do anything in it. And it's just kind of beat up. So we are going to replace it with another one about this size. We don't need anything big. I don't use a microwave very often. Mr. Smith uses it mostly to heat up leftovers and things like that. So we really don't need it to hold more than, say, a plate or a bowl on occasion. Now, when it came time to rearrange the pantry, one of the things that I did was I thought about what are the things that I use the most and what are the things that I don't use as often. And when I kind of thought that through, it helped me figure out where exactly I wanted to put everything. So right when I come in the door, the very first shelving unit right there, you can find the broth, you can find baking ingredients. And up on the top, I have all of my extra herbs and spices in jars that I use to refill my smaller ones that I keep in the kitchen. I have my shelf full of canning supplies, my lids, my rings, my pectin, and things like that. And then on the far wall, away from the door, is all of my store-bought things. All of my cans of, say, refried beans or tomato sauce, my sauces, ketchup, mustards, marinara, things like that. Then when you get to the shelf here, this is where I've got the microwave. And I thought about it, you know, Mr. Smith likes to snack on junk food from time to time. And a lot of times they will get tucked away in a cabinet or something and be forgotten. And as I was putting everything back here into the pantry, it dawned on me, why don't I put all of Mr. Smith's junk food right here next to the microwave where he will see it every time he comes in here to use the microwave. And he's standing here waiting for the microwave. Here's all his junk food, and here's his collection of hot sauces. Everything Mr. Smith needs is right here. Now the shelf down below here, again, I could have added more shelving, but I left this one a little bit taller so that I could put my big things like my gallon of molasses or my big jugs of vinegar and taller bags and things like that. So I think the spacing for everything here in the pantry really works out much more efficiently. This shelving unit right here is all of my home canned, well, most of my home canned preserves. I have a narrow shelf that's all of the shorter jelly jars. I've got all of my vegetables and fruits and salsas and things like that. And then up on the very top, I have my collection of canning lids of all sorts. And then below that is 2 shelves full of empty jars. As I use my home canned goods, I can take the empty jars and set them up on the upper shelves. And then when I do some canning, I can come in here, grab some of the empty jars and take them into the kitchen to use to can the next items. Now I do have some more jars that would not fit in here, and I just stuck those out in the shed. Back during the big pandemic, I stocked up on a lot of canning jars because you couldn't find them. And so when I did find them, I bought some extras. I bought some for myself. I bought some for friends because they were trying to find canning jars and couldn't find them either. And so I've got a little bit of a surplus that wouldn't quite fit in here. And so I just put those out in the shed. They're still in the boxes and they are there for whenever I need them. Now, this being Arkansas and it being very hot in the summertime, I don't know if the lids will still be good, but honestly, the lids that came on those jars weren't great. The jars were fine. The jars, you know, I pressure canned with them and everything, had no issue. But I didn't really care for those lids and I didn't really use them for canning anyways. I keep all of my good lids in here, controlled climate, and all of that. And then the last thing about my pantry is the shelf that's on the far wall right where you come in the door and the shelf over here to the side by the window. I put the bottom shelves very high up off the ground, but just high enough so that I could fit my big buckets up underneath. And those contain my extra flour, my sugar, my sea salt. They contain grains and rice and things like that. Now I have smaller containers, smaller jars that I use most often. My canister set that belonged to my grandmother. And from these big buckets, that's how I fill those other things. So I don't have to come in here and dig out the great big buckets every time I need an ingredient, but this is where I will refill from when I need to fill a smaller container that I use on a regular basis. I do have a couple other things that I still want to do for the pantry, but this is a huge improvement from what it was to where it is now. And so until I get around to doing those other things, this is going to do the job very well. So I hope you find this helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below and I will try to answer them. But I think tomorrow I am going to work on my candles that I had mentioned. I have a variety of candle supplies that I had never gotten around to using prior to us moving here to Arkansas. And I decided it is time to put those to use. So I will share that process with all of you in an upcoming video. So thanks for hanging out with me here today, you guys. I'll talk to you next time.